Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Peniel Ibe, and I'm with the American Friends Service Committee. If you're joining us, please just let us know in the chat with a quick hey, where you're joining us from, and something that's bringing you joy today. What's bringing me joy today is the rain here in DC. It's storming, and it's nice to just be cuddled in the clouds while trying to get some work done. And I'll get started shortly. We'll hear from our other panelists who are joining us today, Giovanna and Ezekiel. And as with every Facebook Live mini, it's going to be a mini conversation between three of us and you to get a sense of what's happening in Congress today with regards to our Citizenship for All advocacy that you have been joining us um, on for the past how many years for some people, and for some who are just recently coming onto this movement. So once again, let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, your name and your location, and what's giving you joy today. And as we're waiting for folks to get started, I will just pass it on to my co-panelists to introduce themselves, where they're joining us from, as well as their location and what's bringing them joy. So Giovanna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Peniel, and everyone else. My name is Giovanna Oaxaca. I'm the Program Director for Migration Policy with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I would say I am also really enjoying the thunderstorm that's outside. It broke through the heat. Let's hope that lasts. And I'll pass it on to my friend Ezekiel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ezekiel. I am the digital organizer with Corazon Arizona out here in Arizona. I am very jealous of the weather that you two have right now because it's nice, bright, and sunny out here in Arizona. But I'm enjoying it, so we're good.
Great. Thanks, Ezekiel and Giovanna. So, folks, our conversation today, like I said, is what's happening in Congress. So think about this like a really, really nice soap opera where we do the last week on Congress. And the theme, the issue here, this is not a romantic comedy. This is a citizenship for all genre. We have been doing extreme advocacy here in DC and around the country. Trying to ensure a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. Some of you have been part of this journey for decades now. Every time we have a new Congress, we reintroduce this call. Every time there's a new president, we reintroduce this call, and we keep it sustained because our community needs protections now. And right now, our ask is for as many as the 11 million undocumented immigrants who need a pathway to citizenship, including TPS holders, these temporary protected status holders, DACA recipients or dreamers or undocumented youth, depending on how you address them, farm workers, and essential workers. Essential workers, for folks who might not know, are a category of individuals who were termed essential by the government during the pandemic. And so these are folks who supported the community during the pandemic, who had to go into work, folks who work in the fields, growing food, folks who worked in restaurants, folks who worked in hospitals, a plethora of spaces where they had to go in every day despite the pandemic. And as many of us were at home, they were working there, making sure that the community was provided for. And the reality is that of the number of essential workers in the United States, a huge portion of them are immigrants, and a huge portion of them are undocumented immigrants with a need for a pathway to citizenship. And so we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting that in this group alongside farm workers, DACA recipients, TPS holders, and anybody else. Here in AFSC, we believe everyone deserves to live where they call home, where they want to call home. Everyone deserves to be with their community. And we continue to push that call everywhere we go. And so why are we talking about this today? We are about 7 months into a new administration, the Biden administration. And the Biden administration signaled their support for a pathway to citizenship by, drafting and introducing in Congress through Senators Menendez and other representatives, the U.S. Citizenship Act, which seeks to protect as many as the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. So this was a signal from the Biden administration that, yes, we want to see a pathway to citizenship. And so we advocates who've been working on this pre the Biden administration, pre the Trump administration, pre the Obama administration, we're like, all right, so we're seeing a signal from the White House. This means we need to move as well. We need to make sure Congress is on the same page. And so we've been advocating nonstop for this. In Congress at the moment, they are negotiating what they're looking at a jobs and recovery package. Some people are saying American Jobs Plan. Some people are calling it the Build Back Better package. Essentially, it's being termed a way for the community to recover from the pandemic. We are still in a pandemic, by the way. So wear your masks when you're outside, get vaccinated if you need to. But the economy is opening back up. And so the Biden administration is trying to pass legislation that does that. And so we want, as immigrant community members, the Build Back Better piece to include immigration, because we cannot build back better if we do not have our immigrant community stabilized. Immigrant community members that were, by the way, excluded from many of the reliefs that the government passed out to the United States in the past year. And so we're saying that building back better means acknowledging the work of farm workers and essential workers, acknowledging the contributions to the communities of TPS holders, DACA recipients, and many other undocumented immigrants. And so we're asking for a clear, timely, inclusive, and transparent pathway to citizenship. We're asking for that to be included in the recovery package, especially one that they plan to pass through the reconciliation process. Just really briefly, the reconciliation process, as we know, is a process by which the Congress can pass legislation without needing a supermajority vote. So they can pass it with just 51 votes on the Senate side. And so we don't have to push to make sure it is as bipartisan as it would need to be for it to be 60 votes, given the current state of Congress. That does not mean that we're not pushing for support from both sides of the aisle, because we need everybody to come to work on this piece of pathway to citizenship for as many people. So where is Congress now? Last week, Senator Sanders, who is the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, released a preliminary budget. Let's call this his budget wish list, right, of what he wants to fund in this upcoming fiscal year. And thanks to the countless and tireless efforts of immigrant advocates, directly impacted individuals, allies, and more, we saw in this budget wish list the senator include tons of money instructing the Judiciary Committee to create what appears to be a pathway to citizenship for the community members that I identified earlier on. And so this is promising, right? It's saying to us that the senator is hearing our demands, that our advocacy is working. And it's saying to us that when we fight and when we pull together and when we band together our resources, we can win. But it is not yet a budget and it hasn't yet passed law. So we cannot give up yet. We need consistent advocacy to get this budget wish list into an actual budget resolution, voted on, see policy language, vote that on, get it to the White House, get it signed, and then start getting people the protection that they need. So while that is happening in the Senate, the House is supposed to be doing the exact same thing, drafting a budget resolution. And a budget resolution is just, top lines. It's like, this is how much money we're going to spend this year. And when they create a budget resolution, they would just tell the different committee members, you have $10 to spend on immigration. You have $10 to spend on infrastructure. You have $10, however the budget goes. And so we wanted to see something from the House as well. And we were thinking that the House would move first. The House was hoping to release their own budget resolution on how they want to see money spent this July, passing it through voting and every other process within Congress and getting voted on by August. Now we're seeing a change in the timeline. We're hearing through the news and from the House Budget Chairman Yarmouth himself that they may be going to step back and wait for the Senate to act. Right? Because they're thinking the Senate does not have as much of a majority as they do in the Democratic Party on the House side. And so if the senators can decide on something, then they can work on it, rather than the House drafting up something that is supported more by Democratic Party members and then moving it to the Senate and not having that advance. So that is where the House, sort of brainstormed and thought up this idea of taking a step back and letting the Senate move. So at the moment, we don't exactly know the timeline that the Senate is going to move with this budget resolution. While we're, holding on to this promise of seeing an inclusion of our demands for a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, we don't know the timeline. We're still expecting that it maybe sometime will be in July, and maybe they would vote sometime in July on it or in September. It's up in the air. But really, that doesn't make much of a difference for us in the sense that this is not a race. This is a marathon. Like, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We've been working at this for many years, and just 3 extra months is not going to phase us because we're doing consistent advocacy and our community needs protection yesterday. So while we're seeing that, we're still urging members to move faster, to not relax, because families and communities and loved ones' lives are on the line, quite frankly. So that's where Congress is right now. At the moment, they're actually in recess, but when they come back, we're either going to see the Senate move forward with a budget resolution. And what we'll be watching for in that budget resolution is if what we saw in the budget wish list actually makes it into that budget resolution. And they'll be watching to make sure that that budget resolution gets voted on and we're not removed from it, right? That our immigration priorities are still included, and that when the House is taking up something, immigration, a pathway to citizenship, is also included in that. So that's really what's happening in Congress. Very simple, no big deal. Just a couple of, dollars being moved around in the numbers of trillions of dollars, decisions being made about our lives. But I think it's always important to remember that we influence this decision, right? The members in Congress, the senators, are accountable to us because they're voted in by us. And so as complicated as the process is, AFSC and organizations like Congressional and ALCA do the hard work to make sure we break it down and understand really what's going on so that we deliver to you constituents who can then go back home and call your senator to say, I hear you all are delaying on this budget resolution. I'm grateful to see that you, maybe if you're Senator Sanders' constituent, for example, I'm grateful to see that you included a pathway to citizenship in your budget wish list. Please, let's make sure that it makes it into the actual budget resolution. So that's what's happening there. So keep, read the news. Things will happen. In terms of what's the next steps are, once we see a budget resolution, they will pass the resolution, and then they will start developing policy language based on that money. So they develop the policy based on how much they have agreed to spend on the specific issue. And then they will negotiate that policy language until things make it up to the White House. So that's roughly the process there. I'm going to turn it now to Giovanna, who's going to talk to us about, how advocacy has been going on, engaging with members of Congress. Why do we know such information? Why do we know the intel? Why do we know the asks? How do we get this information off members of Congress to deliver it to you all? Giovanna?
Thank you for that incredible overview, Peniel. I always admire just listening to Peniel talk because she makes it sound so clear and concise and easier than sometimes it feels. But it's really thanks to the work of all of you who have consistently, as you said, participated earlier, Peniel, in extreme advocacy. And that word stuck with me because we have been relentless. We've been relentless for years, months, weeks, many, many, many days. And so from our perspective, it's important that we don't let up that urgency, that we continue to drive home the narrative that we need to include pathway to citizenship for as many people as possible via this once in a lifetime opportunity and vehicle. And so I'll start off by talking a little bit about where our work really started to pick up and how we've been interacting with our members of Congress, and then follow up with ways that you can plug in your districts. Because as Peniel described, we're approaching an escalation, right? Potentially there could be something in July when it's really important then for us to talk to our members of Congress in their summer recess in August so that they're hearing from us directly about the importance of this issue. And while they're drafting that, hopefully by then they're drafting that language that Peniel was talking about, we are consistently informing them that they need to make that as inclusive as possible. It needs to be clean, it needs to be speedy, it needs to be inclusive. So just a little bit about our engagement as far as outreach to members of Congress goes. So one of I I'm very fortunate that I'm part of the Interfaith Immigration Coalition along here with Peniel, who is the co-chair of the IIC. And the IIC's focus is to pass humane and just immigration reform and legislation. One of our focuses has always been passing legislation for citizenship for all. And this year, that work has really picked up because we've seen multiple bills introduced and now passed in the House. We've seen bills introduced in the Senate. And now we're really narrowing in on this opportunity via reconciliation. We've been meeting with lawmakers since as far back as March, if not earlier, when we first started to hear about the potentiality of this happening. We wanted to hear directly from them. Where do you stand on this? How would you feel about exploring this option? And it's been those consistent meetings with members of Congress, reminding them about our priorities, reminding them about constituents' needs, that I believe has helped reinforce and strengthen this advocacy ask. And it's in these interactions from then that we've heard, okay, well, I'm not so sure. And then in the background, we know that you as constituents have been meeting with them as well. And when we check back in with them a couple weeks, a month later, they're saying, oh, well, we're more open to discussing this idea, right? That's the power of advocacy, is that we're seeing effective advocacy at play. So it's really important to continue to have those conversations. As Peniel said, the timeline is a little bit up in the air, but our advocacy asks remain the same. We want to make sure that a pathway to citizenship is included in the Jobs and Recovery Act, and that this pathway includes millions of essential workers and their families, streamers, and TPS holders, and that we want to make sure it's as inclusive as possible, that it doesn't create exclusions based on criminal interactions or histories, etc. It's just really important for us as a community that we're not excluding anyone from the benefits of citizenship, which, as we know, lead to greater opportunities for career advancement, for families, job growth, etc. So now moving on to how you can get involved, I think this is probably where you're more interested, is that we are heading into summer recess, and that's a good opportunity for you to talk to your member of Congress. Actually, I would say you could talk to them right now. Take 5 minutes of your day at the end of the day, give them a quick call. If you're on the East Coast, it'll still be you still have a good chance of getting a staffer on the phone. If you're on the East Coast, call anyways, but spend at least 5 minutes of your day just making that call to Congress. And we can provide you with a script, and we can provide you with an email, so you can email your member of Congress and remind them about what our priorities are as we're moving to build back better, as we're moving towards a just recovery for our nation, that must include a pathway to citizenship. Otherwise, we are leaving behind a fraction of our community, and that just won't do for a just recovery. So you might be wondering, who should I be calling? Obviously, your member of Congress needs to hear from you. I would say it doesn't necessarily need to be, if your member of Congress is a Republican, you can still talk to them. You need to remind them about what your priorities are as a community. Of course, some of them might be as receptive to the message, but as long as you continue to emphasize why it's important for you and your community, I'd say you can still have that conversation. They need to hear from you. But there are a couple of members that are key targets, particularly if you're in the states of Arizona, Nevada, New Hampshire, West Virginia, Michigan, Minnesota, and Montana. Those are all key senators for us to engage with as we're talking about making sure that this has the votes it needs to pass through reconciliation. And then, of course, engaging with Democratic leadership. That's people like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senator Durbin, Senator Sanders, Senator Menendez from New Jersey, and in the House, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Representative Hoyer, Representative Clyburn, Representative Aguilar, Representative Clark, and many more. I'm happy to send a list of these targets to you. But I want to emphasize, just make sure you reach out to your member of Congress and your 2 senators, and we can provide a call-in script and an email where you can do that. And then, of course, make sure you talk to Republicans. it's been almost 30 years since we passed any major legislation that addresses the situation of 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country. We've delayed a solution long enough. And what we've seen over the years, particularly with DACA and TPS, is that the courts are not good solutions. The courts cannot resolve a situation that affects millions of people. We need legislation. So if you can take the time out of your day to just make a quick call now, or especially during summer recess, then that would be an incredible way to reassert what we all know is that people are here to stay. This is their home, and we can only benefit more as a country together if people who are undocumented are on a path to citizenship. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, and yeah, anything else you want me to talk about, Peniel? I'll do anything for you.
Thanks, Gio. And we'll take questions after we hear from Ezekiel. So yes, the pathway to citizenship is paved with good intentions, but good intentions is not enough. We need action, which is why your calls are needed. This is our action. We make the calls to members of Congress. We remind them why it's important. We share stories. We do meetings, and then the members of Congress pass legislation. This is the agreement that we have with these people. So everybody needs to hold up their own end of the bargain. This is what we're asking for. It's nothing new, right? So next, I'm going to pass it to Ezekiel. Yesterday was the last day of the We Are Essential Fast for Freedom. And if you've been visiting our AFSC Facebook Live earlier this month, last month, we heard from one of our co-workers in Colorado and an immigrant leader who was also fasting in Colorado for this. You know, for the past 3 weeks, faith leaders and undocumented immigrants put their bodies in enormous sacrifice by fasting for freedom, fasting for a pathway to citizenship. Over 65 folks fasted during this period, and we're using that opportunity to urge members of Congress to include citizenship for as many undocumented individuals as possible, with no exclusions. And I think that's something that Gio said that I want us to remember. Most of us here are people of faith, and we believe that everybody is redeemable. We believe we should not be excluded because of our past. We also believe you should not be excluded because of your interaction with the legal system that we know is biased against brown and Black people and immigrants as well. And so we keep rehashing that and making sure our members know what our values are and how our values move us to advocate. So I'm going to turn it now to Ezekiel, who's going to talk about values in action, values in advocacy, and what the Fast for Freedom looked like. Ezekiel?
Great. Thank you. So my name is Ezekiel, and I'm in Arizona. So back on the 9th of June, when we started and launched the Fast for Freedom campaign, I was able to attend with one of our leaders from Arizona. He was a part of the fasting group, and my experience and being able to support him during this fast was such a beautiful and needed movement. So to start off, we are, as Corazon, we are a federation of faith in action. And so I'm here representing both of us. And like you mentioned, Peniel, we had over 65 fasters who attended at the church in Washington, D.C. And throughout this whole month, we were able to obtain a lot of meetings with representatives and senators or their offices. We had a total of 21 meetings and 11 members of Congress that were able to attend. And a lot of that came and happened because of Giovanna. That's where I got to meet her and work with her in some of those meetings. And it was such a pleasure to be able to do that together. What else? So we finished off, like you mentioned, yesterday. And so what the next steps are, what we're looking for is to continue putting that pressure in. So as Corazon, we're continuing that pressure here in Arizona. Like you mentioned, Giovanna, Arizona is one of the really important states where we need to make sure to get our senators on track, and so we're going to continue pushing those efforts. Some of them being making phone calls. Like during the last month, we made over 600 calls. So we want to continue those efforts and apply them here. What that looks like for the safety of the fasters and like just the weather and COVID, we are making this fasting event digitally. Everyone's going to be doing it from home, and it's kicking off next week on the 6th. And so today, actually, we will be sharing on Corazon Arizona's Facebook page. We will be going live, sharing a little bit more of the stories from here in Arizona. So we had 2 fasters attend, one of them being Jaime and the other one being Julia. And so both of them, they will be sharing a little bit about their stories, their experiences, and the way that this fast that we saw this last month motivated them to take lead with what we're seeing here in Arizona. So those are the next steps for us. And we have a lot of the, since it is going to be a digital kind of realm, as the digital organizer, I'm helping create the visuals, the toolkits. So we're ready to be able to invite everyone and anyone who wants to join. We have already a set of individuals ready to fast from here in Arizona. We also even have some from out of state who are going to be joining us from their home during this campaign. So that's a few of our next steps that we have in place.
Thanks so much, Ezekiel. So much power in taking, ownership of situations and, using your faith in advocacy as well, bridging the parts of your life that sometimes folks expect you to keep separate. I'm excited to see how the virtual fast is going to go in Arizona. And folks, if you're interested, just put it in the chat. We could get you some information if you want to fast. And unlike biblical fast references where they're like, don't tell everybody you're fasting, nobody needs to know. This is the opposite of this. If you're fasting for freedom, we need you to scream it at the top of the rooftops. Tell people why you're fasting, what your demands are, what your community needs. So in any way you can support in solidarity, being here, listening to these stories, joining the Facebook Live as well is super important. So, folks, that's what we have from you. We let you know where Congress is right now. There was a question in the chat asking when August recess is, when they're going to be home for a longer period. Right now, the House is scheduled to leave for August recess on August 5th, and the Senate is scheduled to, the House is scheduled to leave July 30th. The Senate is scheduled for August 5th. And so they'll be home, and this is where you can, bird dog them. A lot of them actually have town halls scheduled. And if you go to townhallproject.org, you can actually find out where your member or your senator will be scheduling a town hall and show up there and ask questions like, oh, hey, welcome back home. Great to see you. Nice weather. About that path for citizenship, though. What's going on? I need to ask them, pull up and be like, what's going on? Because we're counting on you. As we do work here, we want to make sure that they're hearing stories from the district. So it's not just the DC folks talking, but they know that it's important to the community as well. So we've talked a lot. As you can see, I've drank water like 3 times. I'm going to stop talking now. We're going to pause for any questions at all that you might have. Please just let us know. We'll try and answer them. And if we don't know, we'll try and get you the answers as well. So any questions, friends? And if you've typed in a question, it takes a second for the questions to pop up in our chat here on this end. So just give it a minute or 2 and we will get an answer to you. Seeing none thus far. This means that we were very clear and concise in sharing our messages. Good job, Giovanna. Great work, Ezekiel. Look at us doing this big time. So yeah, that's it then. It's a Facebook mini. We're going to keep it mini. Final call for questions or comments. And if there's none, please go up through the chat. Make sure you take action. We've shared toolkits for you to call. We've shared email templates as well. So just go through it. There's Corazon's Facebook Live link there. Make sure you're able to join. There's also graphics and sample tweets. One thing about members of Congress is that they definitely check their social media handles. They're just like everybody else. So tweet at them. Make sure you put in your contacts there, and so that your followers as well can also see what you're asking for and amplify that ask. So make sure to use that. Make sure to send them emails, letting them know, that you're a constituent. If you're someone who's directly impacted, or have family that might need, that will be impacted by this legislation and this advocacy, share that as well and say, this is important to us here. Thank you so much, Ezekiel, for sharing about the fast and for the great work Corazon continues to do in Arizona. We'll be holding it down for you all as you carry on your virtual fast. Thank you so much, Gio, for Elka's work, ELCA, we say Elka, ELCA's work, and for just explaining what the advocacy looks like and all the meetings that we go to together and talk. I'm super appreciative of you all who took the time to listen to us today. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay cool, stay hydrated, drink water, put on your masks. It's still a pandemic outside. All right. And thanks to Bo, who's our tech person behind the scenes as well. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.